Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're diving straight into the messy, intense, and absolutely fascinating reality of what our ancestors actually ate, long before supermarkets were ever a thing. You probably ate today without giving it a second thought, right? You grabbed something quick from the pantry or maybe ordered food on an app. But for most of human history, that was completely impossible.
Look, today, grabbing a bite is just a choice. You hit up a drive-thru and maybe spend 20 minutes feeling guilty about it later. But ancient eating, oh man, it was pure, unadulterated survival. There were no fridges humming in the kitchen, zero backup plans. If you didn't find food in the ancient world, you literally didn't eat. It was a high-stakes, daily scramble.
So let's jump right into our first section, the opportunistic eater, where we're going to break that massive paleo myth. You hear so much today about these strict paleo diets, almost like there was just one neat, uniform menu everyone followed. But the truth? We were brilliantly opportunistic. Coastal humans, they were feasting on shellfish and sea plants. Ice Age humans were basically eating exclusively meat to survive the cold. And over in the tropics, it was all about fruits, roots, small animals, and, yeah, insects. We ate wildly different things simply because we ate whatever was edible right in front of us. Which brings us to Section 2, fueling the human brain, or as I like to call it, the scavenger and the chef. Okay, you probably picture early humans as these majestic hunters taking down mammoths with spears, but the gritty reality? We were highly successful scavengers for a very long time. Imagine this, a lion takes down a zebra, eats the best meat, and leaves the bones. Enter humans, armed with rocks. We would literally smash those leftover bones wide open to get to the marrow inside. That marrow is incredibly high-fat, high-calorie tissue. It was a massive energy source that scientists actually believe helped physically grow the human brain. Think about that. Your intelligence today exists partly because your ancestors were top-tier bone smashers. And that brain building completely skyrocketed when we figured out cooking. Discovering fire was an absolute game changer. Take a raw root or a tuber. It's super hard to digest. Toss it in a fire and suddenly you've unlocked all these essential new calories that you just couldn't access before. More energy equals bigger brains. So it wasn't just meat. Learning to cook those stubborn raw carbs literally fueled our incredible cognitive evolution.
But the brain upgrades didn't stop inland. For coastal humans, the ocean was this massive evolutionary cheat code. Seafood is absolutely loaded with omega-3 fatty acids, specifically DHA. And guess what? Your brain is essentially built out of this stuff. Researchers think regular access to this seafood drove a huge leap in human cognition, creativity, and innovation. So when people tell you to eat fish because it's brain food, they are quite literally talking about hundreds of thousands of years of evolutionary history.
All right, Section 3, risk, reward, and bugs. Let's talk about the unsung superfoods. Now, I want you to ask yourself a question. What ancient food was absolutely packed with protein, required zero dangerous hunting, was super easy to find, and was eaten constantly by our ancestors? Any guesses? It's insects. Yep, bugs. Now, I know avoiding them is a pretty common modern quirk in a lot of cultures today, but back then, eating them was an absolute necessity. Bugs were basically the ultimate prehistoric fast food. Our ancestors were regularly scooping up termites, grubs, beetles, and ants. Why? Because it was totally risk-free, no mammoth tusks to dodge, plus they're packed with protein, essential fats, and minerals. Even chimps do this today. Early humans didn't look at a grub as a desperate last resort. They viewed it as a highly efficient, reliable meal. On the flip side of that, early humans also took on extreme physical risks for the ultimate dietary jackpot, honey. I mean, imagine climbing up a sheer cliff face, completely swarmed by angry bees, just to scrape out a handful of honey. Why would anyone do that? Because it was rare, pure sugar. It was an instant, massive hit of calorie-dense energy. They willingly traded immense physical pain for those calories because back then, that trade-off literally defined survival. Let's move on to Section 4, the agricultural paradox and the true cost of farming. So around 10,000 BCE, humanity hit its biggest shift ever. We stopped chasing our food and started controlling it by farming. Sounds like a total upgrade, right? Well, actually, experts call this the agricultural paradox. See, hunter-gatherers only worked a few hours a day to find food and got incredibly diverse nutrition. But early farmers? They worked from sunup to sundown, doing backbreaking labor, eating mostly just one type of grain. They had weaker nutrition and way more disease because they were living in dense early settlements. Farming actually made individual health much worse.
So why stick with it?
Because while farming was terrible for the individual, it produced this massive abundance of storable calories. And that surplus, that's what allowed populations to absolutely boom. It allowed cities to be built and civilizations to rise. It was a massive sacrifice of individual health to make modern human society possible. Which leads us perfectly into Section 5, the invention of preservation, or keeping food alive. Because finding or growing food was just hurdle number one. Keeping it edible without a fridge, that required some serious ancient ingenuity. If your food went bad, you starved in the winter. So we got creative. We figured out how to dry meat into early forms of jerky. We realized that smoking food didn't just make it last, but it actually kept pests away. And incredibly, we unlocked fermentation to create totally safe, long-lasting food sources. And fermentation gave us something monumental: beer. And no, it wasn't invented just to be a fun party drink. Beer was a critical survival tool. It was often safer to drink than the local water supply, completely packed with calories, and it was so valuable it literally became currency. The people building the pyramids in Egypt, they were paid in daily rations of bread and beer. Just let that sink in for a second. All right, our final section, Section 6, brilliant survival. Let's connect all this back to the past. As we wrap up this explainer, I think it's pretty clear that the ancient diet wasn't some perfectly curated, clean-eating lifestyle trend you'd see in a magazine today. It was a messy, chaotic, and utterly brilliant life-or-death scramble. Humans used literally everything. We smashed bones, we wielded fire, we foraged plants, ate bugs, and harvested the oceans. We survived because we were adaptable enough to use every single resource just to make it to the next day. And somehow, against all odds, it worked. Today, we sit down to these globally sourced meals delivered right to our doors without even thinking about it. But it's so important to remember that every single bite we take connects us directly back to hundreds of thousands of years of intense, gritty human survival. We are literally the descendants of the best scavengers, the bravest hunter-gatherers, and the most inventive cooks in history. So, I'll leave you with this. The next time you sit down to eat your dinner, take a look at your plate and ask yourself, how does this meal reflect the brilliant, opportunistic survival of our ancestors? Because remember, every single thing you're eating today used to be a matter of pure, unadulterated survival. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and keep staying curious.